The final batch of info for 2025 just dropped from a developer roundtable. The devs went deep into the scale, unique faction traits, and fresh mechanics. I've combed through the interview and distilled it down to the absolute essentials so you don't have to waste your time. So let's dive in. And we gotta start with a key fact. 2 out of the 3 devs answering questions were true studio veterans, not fresh recruits. Take Ian Roxburgh, the game director. He's the guy who was responsible for every mainline entry in the fantasy trilogy. Then there's Simon Mann, the lead campaign designer. Way back in 2015, he was the one personally showing off gameplay for the very first Total War Warhammer. These are the people who set the brand new standards for the series that we saw in 2016. And now this same veteran crew is handling an even more critical project set in the grim darkness of the far future. The first topic on the table was the uniqueness of the starting factions: Space Marines, Astra Militarum, Orks, and Eldari. Just as we guessed in our last breakdown, Space Marines are the scarce elite of the Imperium. You simply won't be able to throw them away left and right.
Simon Mann dropped some real numbers. You'll be controlling only about 100, maybe 200 Space Marines in total, but every single one of them is a living war machine, roughly equal in power to 100 enemy soldiers. Sure, the ratio is a bit symbolic, especially against orcs, but the point is clear: quality over quantity. Don't expect to see armies of thousands of Astartes, which, by the way, is 100% lore accurate. This faction doesn't do Sim City. They don't build cities or infrastructure like the others. Your main resource is the fighters themselves, and you'll have to value every single life. The Astra Militarum, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. The Imperial Guard is the faction for fans of that classic Total War gameplay. Here you're looking at massive infantry blobs, massed artillery barrages, and a strategy built on overwhelming firepower and sheer numbers.
Playing as the Guard, get ready to become an industrial tycoon. You'll have to develop infrastructure on a planetary scale just to feed the insatiable war machine with fresh tanks and infantry. The devs stated it plainly: the Astra Militarum is the choice for the traditionalists. If you love that classic Total War economy and logistics, this is your home. The other factions offer way more asymmetric and unusual gameplay. And now, the Orks, the icons of Warhammer 40k, hostile to literally everything that breathes. Just like in fantasy, these Xenos live for war, loot, and faith in Gork and Mork. Their tech is a true junkyard masterpiece. Tanks converted and cobbled together from trash and the wreckage of enemy vehicles. Rockets on sticks, tin cans with saws. That's their whole vibe. Judging by the concept art, Orks can even occupy orbital stations. Basically, this whole scrappy aesthetic of the Fungus Boys serves one mechanic: momentum. The more fights you pick and the more you win, the stronger the Orks become.
Though Orks, like the Guard, rely on numbers, their approach to war is radically different. The Greenskins don't build factories. They live off looting and trophies. By the way, the sharp-eyed among you might have spotted symbols of the Bad Moons clan in the footage. These are the famous Orc 1%ers. Their teeth, or teef, grow faster than other boys, and in Orc society, teef are currency, so money won't be an issue for them. Finally, the fourth faction, the Eldari, Eldar. Simon Mann warned right away, this race will feel completely different from anything the studio has done before. This isn't a faction you can just throw into a mindless frontal assault. Due to extinction and population issues, the Eldar are forced to preserve every single fighter, relying on speed and cunning rather than trading blows. The Eldari narrative is defined by tragedy. Having lost their former glory through the birthing of Slaanesh, they now stand on the precipice of extinction. From a mechanical standpoint, their design philosophy mirrors that of the Space Marines, placing high value on individual units. However, their combat doctrine differs significantly, prioritizing stealth, velocity, and the utilization of the webway. The developers emphasized that the Eldari campaign will feature distinct objectives: Rather than traditional expansionism, often referred to as map painting, players will frequently assume the role of guardians, tasked with preventing cataclysmic events capable of destroying the galaxy. This objective must be pursued while facing active hostility from all other factions. Specific mention was made of craft worlds. These titanic arcs function as military bases and recruitment hubs. It appears they will be situated in inaccessible zones off the visible map, introducing a new layer of strategic depth and mobility to the gameplay loop.
Now, let us examine the units revealed in the concept art. Space Marines. Alongside standard Ultramarines, a captain in Gravis armor has been identified. Whether this represents a Lord or a hero unit remains unclear, but the model is a one-to-one replica of the physical miniature. Players should accustom themselves to this level of detail. Games Workshop will enforce even stricter visual fidelity here than in Warhammer Fantasy. Everything that exists in plastic will be transferred to the game with meticulous accuracy. The same artwork contains a reference to using this model base for aggressors. This is significant. Aggressors function as walking turrets, equipped with power fists, back-mounted Fragstorm grenade launchers, and gauntlet-mounted bolters or flamers. This indirectly confirms their presence in the roster, even though a standalone design was not explicitly shown. Astra Militarum. The Guard immediately showcased the Cascarin, Cadian Elite, and the Rogel Dawn battle tank. Named after the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, this behemoth is bristling with weaponry. We also spotted field ordnance batteries in 3 distinct configurations: bombast field guns, Malleus rocket launchers, and heavy las cannons. Given the loadout versatility in the tabletop game, it is highly probable that this entire arsenal will transition into the digital format.
For the Orks, there are no radical deviations, yet the visual fidelity is commendable. We have identified war bosses with variable war gear configurations, such as the Power Claw, Killicans, and Knobs, serving as heavier, more aggressive infantry. And, naturally, the Stompa, which was proudly showcased in the trailer. The Eldari, or Eldar roster, is equally robust. The forces are led by autarchs. Craftworld militia are represented by guardians. The lineup includes melee specialists, Howling Banshees, and elite ranged units, the Dire Avengers, who offer significantly superior combat performance compared to standard guardians. The most significant revelation, however, is the Avatar of Kine. It will serve as the faction's elite monstrous unit. Notably, its design is strictly derived from the recent 2022 miniature. Regarding mechanics, this galactic maneuvering will function as a key element of meta progression within the global map, the Crusade Theater. However, according to developer statements, the initial gameplay loop will commence locally, within the confines of a single planet. Each battle represents a conflict for a strategic asset. For instance, an entire hive city may be represented simply as a single capturable region.
Even if a hive city houses a population in the billions, within the scale of Total War Warhammer 40k, it is abstracted to a single region, a mere fragment of the planetary map. However, its acquisition is strategically critical. Securing such a location, for instance when playing as the Imperium, establishes a vital beachhead. This functions simultaneously as a strategic bonus and an area denial mechanic. The developers cited a prime example involving an orbital defense cannon. By controlling the region housing this emplacement, you deny the enemy its support capabilities, while potentially gaining a powerful active asset, faction permitting. Another significant feature is the ability to intervene in third-party conflicts. Players can interject into battles already raging on a continent between rival factions. Envision a scenario where the Astra Militarum is engaging the Eldari, and your forces breach the engagement zone. This dynamic promises to elevate the scale of combat and introduce a layer of unpredictability. Finally, regarding the naval aspect, void ships will serve at a minimum as orbital support platforms, delivering bombardment directly onto enemy positions during terrestrial engagements.
The fleet acts as your primary strategic asset. From orbit, players can coordinate heavy bombardment, summon reinforcements, or execute the instantaneous redeployment of armies to critical planetary sectors. It is axiomatic, yet bears repeating. Naval vessels facilitate interworld troop transport and resolve a spectrum of logistical and tactical challenges.
Notably, the Void will not serve merely as a static backdrop. Developers have pledged that interplanetary space will be populated with active content, unique events, anomalies, and points of interest, POIs. In essence, this represents an evolution of the sea encounters mechanic from the fantasy trilogy, expanded to a galactic scale. Regarding the battles themselves, the evidence points to a definitive shift in design. Engagements are set to become more protracted and tactical. The era of rapid skirmishes appears to be over. Players will commence combat with a limited vanguard, requiring the dynamic deployment of reserves to react to the evolving tactical situation.
The troop deployment mechanic for the Astartes is self-evident: drop pods. The Astra Militarum possesses no such capability, which logically imposes constraints on their tactical mobility. However, the specific implementation of this reserve system raises concerns. There is a distinct possibility that Creative Assembly may attempt to integrate mechanics from the Total War Warhammer 3 multiplayer Domination Mode, where reinforcements are purchased using resources accrued via capture point control. For a single-player campaign, such an approach would be detrimental. The system must be grounded in grand strategy rather than arcade-style game loops. Availability of reserves should be contingent upon actual orbital assets, fleets, or battle barges, rather than arbitrary ground-based objective control. We previously observed contentious design choices in the Realms of Chaos campaign. It would be unfortunate to see the immersion of the 40k setting compromised by the intrusion of competitive multiplayer mechanics.
Consider the following tactical scenario. The front line is collapsing. Immediate reinforcement by Terminators is required to plug the breach. How should this mechanic function? Ideally, the player expends a global strategic resource, e.g. requisition, to authorize an immediate drop pod deployment to the specific coordinates. Conversely, a system predicated on capture an objective, accumulate ticker points, and then summon would likely face community backlash. It represents an arcade abstraction rather than a simulation of warfare. This brings to mind a compelling concept for meta progression. High-tier assets, such as aggressors, could be initially locked or strictly capped. To deploy them, the player would need to complete specific strategic objectives or advance a tech tree. Theoretically, this strikes an optimal balance between power fantasy and lore authenticity. In conclusion, regarding customization, the developers have exclusively demonstrated these features using the Space Marines. Consequently, the extent to which other factions, such as the Orks or Eldari, will receive comparable depth in customization remains an open question.
Summarizing the customization suite, the level of player agency appears absolute. Configuration extends to color schemes, attachments, and decals, detailing down to individual components of power armor. Placing emblems on knee guards or applying asymmetrical coloring to pauldrons is fully supported. The individualization of the chapter is being heavily emphasized. Indications suggest this extends beyond mere cosmetics. It is highly probable that players will be able to define combat doctrines, tailoring the faction's martial philosophy to specific playstyle preferences. However, the specifics of meta progression remain opaque. The impact of victories on the galactic state, the precise nature of the Crusade map, and whether this constitutes a live service element with persistent sectoral warfare versus a narrative-driven experience were not clarified in the interview. Realistically, the release is at least a year away. Developers explicitly stated that substantive updates, specifically developer diaries showcasing the campaign map and combat mechanics, will not arrive until spring 2026. Until that window, an information blackout is expected. Regardless, I will continue to monitor the situation closely. Please provide your analysis of the revealed content in the comments and subscribe for future technical breakdowns. Good luck to all.